and in at least Norwegian pronunciation, that is NORDE, which is Norway's first think tank on digital ethics. So, Leonora, I'll hand it over to you and ask you to introduce your presentation.
Thank you, Trym. And thank you again for the invitation. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the other parts of the talk and the discussion at the end. So I hope you all have questions for me. And I want to share a slide with you and introduce both myself and our council, the Norwegian Council of Digital Ethics, and also explain a little bit more about what I think about digital ethics. And first of all, let me tell you that I'm a theologian, and people often ask me, why is a theologian concerned with digital ethics? And my answer is that in these times of digitalization, this is one of the issues that are both urgent and important. And I found that this field is so complex that we need different kinds of expertise to fully understand and to be able to develop new technology in a direction that can really contribute to a better society. And this is what makes me interested in the field. And I always work interdisciplinary. So this is also the key idea behind this Norwegian Council of Digital Ethics, because I took the initiative to found the Norwegian Council of Ethics, NORDE, because I experienced that in Norway, we had many experts with very relevant knowledge within different fields, and most were living within their own web, within their own bubble of expertise, talking mainly to experts within similar fields. So we lack this common forum to discuss digital ethics from an interdisciplinary perspective. And this is what we do in NORDE. We have experts within many different fields: ethics, technology, of course, law, philosophy, medicine, social sciences, bank and finance, military, and so on. And we also have representatives both from the public sector, NAV, Digitaliseringsdirektoratet, and the private sector, KPMG, DNVGL, and so forth. And of course, academia. And our main goal is to make sure that digitalization and artificial intelligence is developed and used in a responsible way. And as you can hear, it's a huge task. And in order to succeed, we need to work together on many different areas, from education and policy making and so forth, and different levels, both nationally and internationally. And we also think it's important to have this Amara's law with us, that we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. So how can we make sure that we don't? That is our question. And I think an important part of this is to contribute in the public sphere to the public debate, making sure that digitalization is discussed based on facts and knowledge, not hopes and fears. So therefore, you might have met members of the board in the public sphere on conferences or in many newspaper articles. And as you might see, it's mainly Norwegian. This is one way of lifting up the theme of digital ethics. And we also have our own podcast. You might have listened to it already, where we discuss topics related to digital ethics and other pressing issues, from the question of free will and security to internet governance. So let me say more about what I mean with digital ethics. Just to make some commercial for myself. Before I start, I want to start with telling you a little story. Because on February 12 this year, I held a lecture on sharing data and ethics. And China had just launched their close detection app to fight the spreading of COVID-19. And during the lecture, I explained what we knew about the app, how it worked, and asked the audience, can you please download it? And people laughed. They thought it was a joke, and on February 12, it was a joke. 1 month later, as you know, Norway closed down, and 2 months later, we had a Norwegian close detection app, Smittestop. And I used this story to remind myself how extremely fast things changes. That something that seemed impossible and unthinkable in February was a reality shortly after. The process of adapting new technology and implementing it within the health sector, but also all other sectors, has never been faster. And the pace has never increased more exponentially. This is a speed that regulation cannot keep up with, and that regulation will not keep up with, due to the nature of regulation in our democratic systems. So this is why digital ethics is more important than ever. And to reflect upon digital ethics is to analyze and understand new technology. How does it work? What can it do? And based on this knowledge and analysis, to discuss how it might affect society in order to decide how we should and must use it to live up to the ideal of AI for good. And this need to combine computer science and ethics was first addressed by James Moore in the mid-1985. So that's a long time ago. And I think it's surprising to see how relevant the tendencies that Moore pointed out in the 1980s, how relevant they are today. For example, he said that we live in a regulatory vacuum because the laws are lacking or behind the development of new technology. We live in a concept vacuum because things are changing so fast. For example, learning. We used to know or have a quite straight idea what learning was. And now things are changing so fast, we don't know. And in this vacuum, we need to use ethics. And one of the goals of the digital ethics is to be able to exploit or explore this room of opportunity that lies between the two poles, use and misuse, and to avoid misuse. Because we need to be able to explore the opportunities without making the changes that we don't want. And I think it's very useful to have an idea of how can we do this. And I like Virginia Dignam's 3 levels of how to implement ethics. Firstly, she says it's ethics for designers, which means to the codes of conduct, the regulatory requirements, the standards, and the certification process that ensures the integrity of all actors as the research, design, construct, employ, and manage artificial intelligence systems. So that's the human part of it. And the second level is what she calls ethics in design, which refers to the regulatory and engineering processes. So this is the process part that support the design and evaluation of AI systems as they integrate with or replace traditional social structures. And the third level is the most important, but also the most difficult. How do we implement ethics by design, which is about the behavior or the artificial intelligent systems. How do we do this? And I think it's important to remember that when we talk about ethics in all these relations, we usually talk about ethics in a very narrow sense. The ethics that was explored in Greek philosophy and translated through the millennia by Christian and Muslim theologians, the Western sense of ethics. Whereas what we see is that AI is being developed all over the world, also with different value systems. China is the obvious example. And I think to explore how and in what way ethics is implemented in new technology, in which way ethics is used and what kind of ethics. For example, if the individual-based ethics or the role-based ethics is implemented in technology, in what way can we say that technology is neutral? Or is it loaded with core values? And if it is, does it matter? Will it change society in different ways or other ways than we expect? China is the obvious example, but there are so many other different kinds of technologies, apps. This is Upshare, one of the Saudi Arabian applications that reflect another value system. I don't know if you've heard of it, but like the Norwegian Altinn, it is a portal to register what you own and pay taxes and all these different things. And since men are treated differently in the system than women, you see quite different expressions of ethics in this app. So the question is, how does the development of ethics on the global arena affect us? How can we cope with it? And of course, a very important part of this is to understand the core values of the society and decide, is this something we want to change? Is this something we want to keep? And how do we do that? For example, if you want equality, justice, what does it mean? Does it mean to give everyone the same, like you see on my left here? Or does it imply to give those who need more? Or something completely different, like you see on the very far right? Which understanding do we have of justice, and how do we implement it into technology? These are questions we need to discuss when we talk about AI for good. So to understand what are our core values and what do we do with them in relation to the new technology? This is one of the debates that we need and that we need to do in an interdisciplinary and intersectorial space or forum. And bias is, of course, a very important part of this discussion. And I assume that you all know the examples of algorithms that discriminate in recruitment processes. And to discuss bias on a very particular level, like again, Virginia Dignam has some very interesting discussions on what kind of biases are necessary and what kind of biases can we discuss and change. She in this article that I want to share with you, bias in machine learning, what is it good for? She discusses what we also see in philosophy, that we need a certain kind of bias in order to understand and in order to learn. And the question is, which kind of bias shall we change? Is it the historical bias, which is part of the bias world, or evaluation bias? And when we look at examples of problematic biases, they're often related to this last model bias. And again, you probably know all the examples. For example, how crime predicting algorithms discriminate, even though they use it. And the question of whether predicting algorithms, for example, in predictive policing, will discriminate or whether they are very effective. You have the same in the health system, where they see that algorithms are affecting millions because they are biased against Black patients, as in this example. So the question is, how can we use machine learning in order to stop the bias that we have in the real world and make a better world, to put it bluntly? I want to point to two other different kinds of biases that I think we often forget. In this case, you see from the insurance world. We know that you can use sensors that evaluate how you learn, how you drive, and if you drive correctly, they will give you a better price. And I talked to one of the companies that offer this kind of insurance in Norway and asked, who are the customers that want this product? And they had asked themselves the same question, and they said the typical customer is male, around 45 years, has high expectations of his own driving skills, and lives in Trøndelag. So it's a very small group, I would say, and meaning that the products that we make that are personalized are not for everyone. They often discriminate some and are customized to be perfect for others. And what I would wish for is new models that will be suitable for everyone, not just, again, the white male in his best age. Another kind of bias is implemented in the personalized search machines. This is a research done in Denmark on schools, where they saw that the personal search motors was good for some of the students, but not everyone. For example, they saw that children with parents with high level of education got better search results when they searched, for example, Shakespeare for a school assignment, whereas children with parents with lower levels of education had worse results. And this, of course, had an effect on the grades they got, and then again on the opportunities they had to study further. And what I'm saying is that personalization can have effects on groups, as we see in this example. So we need to discuss all these kind of biases in order to understand how can we use technology in order to get less discrimination and better systems. Again, it might be easier to fix an algorithm than to change a biased person. So I think it's a huge potential here, but we need to think carefully of how we use it. So I want to end this by pointing at some examples of thinking of how can we make technology that is good for the groups that we usually forget. Not the white male in his best age, but for example, children, disabled person. How can we find guidance policies that help us develop technologies that are good for also the groups that need it the most? This is one of the initiatives that we also have a Norwegian initiative that try to make technology that is suited for children, good for children. So that was what I wanted to share with you. And I look forward to questions and discussions afterwards.
Thanks very much, Leonora. And thanks for all those interesting examples. I think some of those examples will hopefully stimulate some discussion afterwards as well. Very, very good and relevant examples. So let me just say, I'm not pretending to be Marianne. I moved to this to her chair basically because I had a problem with my own computer. So I hope I'm not doing something unethical by probably saying Marianne under my picture, but I'm still Trym. Let's move on to the next part of this, and we'll hand it now over to May Thorseth and Pinar Øzturk. And I think the presentation, May will give this first presentation, and then Pinar will also contribute to the discussion afterwards. So May is a professor of philosophy at the Department of Philosophy here at NTNU. She's the director of NTNU's program for applied ethics, and she's a president of the Royal Norwegian Society of Sciences and Letters, leader of humanities class, and a member of the board since 2018, and a member of the Ethical Council of the Defense Sector of Norway. So, and I think to many of us, you are a new face, many of us in the AI community. So looking very much forward to get to know you a bit better, maybe partly through this discussion. So over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Trym. And we are very happy to have this opportunity to present a newly started research group at NTNU. And it actually came into existence by someone which is not just anyone. It's an important person at your department, and I'll just move to next slide here. Here you can see Pinar Øzturk. She's associate professor at ED, and she was actually the one who contacted me, and I'll say a little bit about it in a few seconds. Just before that, I would like to present the members of the group this far, and I would emphasize this far because we want to have more people on board. Asle Kiran, Ronny Selbakk Myhre, Lisa Reuter, Heather Broomfield, Jonathan Knowles, Jussi Haukioja, Mariam Kyselo, Rune Nydal, Roger Andre Sørå, Espen Dyrnestabel, Erlend M. Dons. And just to mention this far, we have people from, of course, the Department of Computer Science, mainly Pinar, and then myself, Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies, and from CULT, Center for Technology and Society, and also from INB, which is Department of Neuroscience, Neuromedicine, sorry, and Movement Science. And now I would like to just give you, because we were asked to say something about how this is that we have this group or cooperation between our departments. So you asked us to say something about why is interdisciplinary cooperation important to this topic, and why cooperation between IDI and IFR, that is between technologists and philosophers. And just briefly, the whole thing started by Pinar Øzturk contacting me, and she was supported by, or she had a tip from Jon Kroksti, who is your department leader, head of department, sorry. And the point was that Pinar wanted to bring more ethics into AI research. And to say something about why this is important. Well, interdisciplinary work is important because mainly because all technology is loaded with or entrenched in values. There is no neutral technology. But also, and additional to this more ethical aspect, there are also cognitive aspects, an understanding of the relation between human brain and perception, which is an integrated or integral and important part as well, additional to ethics, to bring in cognitive and neuroscientific perspectives from philosophy. So that's the reason why people in this group who come from philosophy are not only ethicists like me. There are also people in dealing with cognition and other more so-called theoretical aspects of philosophy. And yeah, some people work a lot on technology ethics with a lot of people from different areas of technology, where when we say that we think it's a good idea for IDI, for our department, philosophy and computer science to work together, we were those who started this work, but we see that we also want to recruit people from other places. I mean, some people in our group already work together with people from several other departments as well. I mean, the starting point is that there are both cognitive and ethical challenges. For instance, when we make choices, and thanks to Leonora for the very good lecture you gave, because you also brought up several of the things that we, of course, share with you in realizing that we need to develop further in cooperation. And but when it comes to choices, I mean, many of the choices are made by the help of or by AI, or so we think they do. And this, of course, involves a lot of questions about autonomy. Who is actually the one who is choosing? I mean, we have technology that facilitating technology, helping us facilitate choices. But this also is a challenge to democracy and to informed, well-informed choices we make. So that's, of course, a very basic thing. I think I should just move on to the next slide. We were also asked why we consider it the main challenge, the whole topic of AI, ethics and philosophy, because the name of the research group is a research group for AI, ethics and philosophy. I try here, or not only me, but Pinar and I together have tried to identify, and also together with the group, we are newly started, so we haven't had many meetings, but we have had all the people mentioned on board and who have given input to what we actually want to focus on in this group. Just to mention some of our main priorities ahead, which you also asked about. I would like to start with one main challenge. I suppose that Leonora knows this very well, the so-called Coleridge dilemma. It says that when change is easy, the need for it cannot be foreseen. But when the need for change is apparent, change has become expensive, difficult, and time-consuming, which means that there is a need for ethics and also philosophy to be embedded in technology from the very beginning. And which means that we don't actually solve this. I mean, per se, I mean, this is a dilemma, so we will never solve it. But the problem is that a genuine problem with development of technology, and in particular AI, because it's so intrusive, it's so so the main problem is that we cannot foresee what problems will turn up when we introduce or implement some technology. But as soon as it has become common, I mean, we can all think of our iPhones or whatever Internet of Things we are used to. We know that it's very hard. I mean, it's impossible to get rid of them, and it's also very hard to change them. So I think even if we do not do research into artificial intelligence, we are all we are. It has an impact on our lives. And one of the things that we want that some of us and I myself have taken an interest in is something that I think Leonora also referred to it, but Shoshana Zuboff is the one who has implemented or created the word. It's surveillance capitalism, which is actually about the problem when we have those giants like Google and all those big giants, AI giants that use the behavioral surplus for sale. So this sale of this behavioral surplus, all this that we give out or give away without actually notifying or being aware of it. And this is used for sale. So that's one aspect of this surveillance capitalism. And it's a threat in many, it's a threat to autonomy, a threat in many ways, not least when it comes to democracy. So I just mention it very briefly now, because we don't have the time now to get deeply into these things. But we all know, just look to the elections in the US or whatever. Technology is technological manipulation of choices. And it's both in political arenas, but also in our private lives. Maybe, a lot of you, of course, know this nudging. We can use technology to nudge people, to make people do maybe things we think is very, very good. We might want to make people stick to the sustainability development goals, to act more sustainably, which we would think is a good thing, but we can use it, for artificial intelligence is, of course, very powerful in this respect. And it's possible to obtain, and it's a Janus phase. It's both for the good and the bad, of course, because we can use AI to have an impact on people. It might be possible to obtain better informed choices. Maybe we can use AI to inform people better. But there are not very many proofs that it's happening this far. So the big questions are, of course, how should we do it? And why should we do it? Then I would just move to the next we mentioned here, where AI is important and where our priorities are in this group. The decision support systems for public sector. And of course, as already mentioned by Leonora as well, these biases in algorithms, is a huge problem. And we know there is a lot of discrimination and unfairness due to this. And I know that Pinar has this as a main part of her research. And we believe that our focus is to have transdisciplinary understanding of the interaction between human and machine. It's about autonomy, automatization, but a huge range of other aspects as well. So I think it's one of the more important things here is that we need to do this. Not only that all disciplines or many disciplines need to deal with these aspects, but we need to do it together, which requires, of course, translation. We need to learn each other's languages. And I, as a philosopher and ethicist, for instance, I need to know sufficiently well how to, communicate about, to know about, or in a meaningful way when I talk to computer scientists, as an example. And and more concretely, what's happening in our group, what will be our main priorities. I said some few things about how we want to prioritize when it comes to our research, but more concretely, there is an upcoming workshop on the 10th of December, mainly planned as internal, workshop, but I think we still need to discuss Pinar and the rest of the group. It's going to be a physical event in Trondheim. And one of those who we have invited is a colleague of also Leonora, I understand, Einar Duenget-Bøen, who we all, both Pinar, you and I know. He will be here and talk about artificial morality, which is part of what I mentioned here. Sorry, I would just briefly go back to, artificial morality. I mentioned surveillance capitalism, but this artificial morality, there's a lot of research being done, and people believe that we can turn people into more moral people by the help of AI. I'm quite skeptical, but I think also it's worth discussing. And there's a lot of philosophical debate, technological philosophical debate on this, whether and in what way we could turn people into, so to speak, better in some way. But what this amounts to, it's not at all easy. But one problem is if we use technology to try to make people make better choices, who is then doing better choices or acting better? So of course this has a lot to do with autonomy, but also, I mean, it's is this a good idea at all? That's only just to hint on one really important issue here. Okay, so this is one among more of the topics we will bring up in this workshop. And I think we should consider whether we should turn it into a webinar, something which would be available also to others, but we haven't finalized that discussion yet. Another more concretely is to use what we do, parts of what we do in this workshop, to continue developing a paper together jointly as a first step towards an application to the Norwegian Research Council. Lastly, but very importantly, I would also mention that we haven't much in our portfolio yet, but we do have, and Pinar has obtained resources for one PhD at IDI, and where I will be one of the co-supervisors. So that's something other concrete. So we want to build the competence further, and I think this is also one of the, I mean, it fits very well into both program for applied ethics. Our task is to build the ethical competence in all areas of NTNU. So this, when I'm talking now to all of those who are not yet part of our group, we want to invite more people to join us and to help identify how we can develop some of these issues that we have mentioned further. But I think we need definitely do much more in ethics, but also the more theoretical cognitive aspects of it, which is really important to just to try to understand, and also all these problems already mentioned about all this technology that people, I mean, most people have a very little clue how it works in their lives. So I think I'll stop there. I hope, Pinar, I didn't leave out too much, but we can come back to in this debate. I think we still have time for that. So thank you for your attendance, and I stop. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Hope for more.
The sound is not good.
Not because I was moving on. Can you hear me?
No, it's not good, Trym. Move back to Marianne's.
But I'm at Marianne's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's Okay, I'll try. Heri, please help me out if the sound breaks down. Let's improvise if we have to. But I wanted to bring Heri and Pinar into the discussion first, not having been visible for most of you guys yet. So both Heri and Pinar are with the Department of Computer Science as professors and associate professor, and so we have Leonora and May coming in from the philosophy side, and we have you guys as technologists, at least starting from that side. So I wanted to maybe start with I'll ask both Heri and Pinar say just a few words about in what ways you are specifically approaching this topic of ethics as an element when you do your AI research projects coming in from the technology side. If you could say a few words about that.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe you should start, Pinar, and I can follow up.
What was the question? Was it why we are interested in?
No, if you could discuss this also from the technology side of things. So what sort of elements are important in your research that ties these two topics together?
Yeah. I mean, when you say ties these two topics, you mean ethics and philosophy, I mean, computer science and the others. Why? Yeah. I mean, personally, I love to collaborate with, other disciplines than computer science people, researchers. I worked a lot with philosophers and cognitive science intensely in my PhD. But it is not just personal thing. I think AI is the subfield of computer science that is dependent on, indeed, a lot to other disciplines. So cognitive science and philosophy is just two of them, but there are a lot more also: mathematics, statistics, that's natural, and then it's law, it is sociology, a lot of things. So I think it is therefore was very natural and necessary to ask for collaboration from other disciplines. And also now we are enjoying a very nice AI spring, but we experienced other times, winter times. And I'm thinking if there will be another winter in AI, it will be because of ethical problems. So that was one of my, so to say, motivations for reaching out to philosophy and sociology, cognitive science people. I personally have a focus. I mean, ethics is quite big, AI and ethics, I mean, and it is a lot of different types of ethical problems based on the tasks and domains and where and how it will be used. These type of things we were not so much prepared because, to say it honestly, so we did AI behind the closed doors in our offices, and we found some toy problems, and then defined the problem and did it. But now it is AI is out of the offices into the real life, and then we are facing its consequences that affects both individuals and society groups. So my focus is also in that there are a lot of like explainability, like accountability, a lot of other dimensions of ethical problems. My current focus is on fairness, discrimination due to bias in data, bias in algorithms. So, and then the notion of fairness is an kind of quite heavily philosophical, also practical, but it has also a philosophical aspect. And then I can see that, to make it short and then give the word to Heri, in philosophy there are a lot of different approaches to ethical things, like normative ones, deontological and utilitarian, which can be mapped to mathematical concepts or knowledge representation and reasoning in computer science. I see that it is possible to make the philosophical approaches, theories translatable to computer science and AI, and then do this. This is one way of doing ethics in AI, but there are others as well. As Leonora said, there are different approaches. So this is just one of them, and we need a lot more in addition to philosophy also, but that is just a start. It was too long.
Yeah. Thank you, Pinar. From my perspective, it's more like I have the focus on technology and how to develop technology that take into account all the dilemmas that we meet when we develop new methods and so forth. One aspect that we have been looking into is because, so addressing the ethical part has become a much more natural part of the work we do because of the natural aspects of it. For instance, when we work on the developing method within medicine, we have to think about what aspects that can touch the ethical part of that. For instance, we develop a method for diagnosing medical conditions in small children. Then how do we do that without violating the privacy aspects, violating the fact that we should take into account that we shouldn't present the diagnosis directly to the patient through the app, but through the doctors and so forth. Also, when we develop methods for detecting hate speech in social media, that also comes with the fact that we have to identify the issues related to disclosing which persons are related to those, and that also touches the personal, privacy issues. There are questions on the Q&A that I would like to answer right away, because it's also related to what we have been doing. And one of that is how do we use machine learning to develop greener technology. I've been a part of the UN Science and Policy and Business Forum, and where we discuss how to exploit the technology that we have today to make our planet a greener place to live. And also at the R Lab, we also have the collaboration with our partners, Telenor, on developing methods for measuring the air quality in the cities using Trondheim municipality as a pilot. So we already have some activities related to that. So yeah.
Thanks a lot, Heri. And I think the question was, as you said, on making machine learning greener, which is a big topic. And
yes.
I think what the question sort of points to is that digital technologies as such has become, a very important factor when it comes to carbon emissions.
Yeah, actually, I've discussed that as well, because when you develop, for instance, a machine learning method for better recommender systems, for instance, and that makes it popular for users, and that also creates, carbon footprint due to the increased necessity of energy consumption. One aspect that we try to address is how to make instead of the traditional brute force method, developing neural networks that are becoming more larger and larger without considering, the effect of developing larger networks, how to make them work on smaller networks. So, like, no need to train the models using, too much energy, too much data, and so forth. So we actually have 2 projects on that already.
Thanks, Heri. Okay, let me try. There was a question here. I think it was from Arild Næss. It came while you were speaking, Pinar, saying that he's glad to see that you're including cognitive aspects in the perspective for the research group. One question that has often been raised is whether computers have consciousness and what ethical issues that would raise. And I think you could have your go on that.
Yeah. You know, this is he is asking a, million kron question, whether computers can have a consciousness. It is a very old question and unanswered questions. Well, personally, I can say no, they are not, they don't have consciousness, but it is this is very debatable thing. Of course, I think we have to, now what we are trying to do is indeed almost making machines to be able to do things that people do, meaning that we need more conscious machines, but we don't know how to do that. I think a collaboration between cognitive psychology, for example, neuroscience and computer science is necessary for this. Just kind of pretending or putting some more doses of things that are similar to consciousness, that ability to explain things, for example, can be interpreted as consciousness. That kind of stuff we should put into, because if you start discussing what consciousness is, when can we say what is the metric, what is the measure? When can we say that, well, okay, this can pass the exam of consciousness? How shall we decide? It is very difficult, but we are aware of this, and I think explainability is one thing, one aspect, one tiny thing, and putting it into the system increase kind of consciousness that we can expect. We don't hear you, Trym, at all.
No, I was muted.
Sorry.
May, you raised your hand, so you wanted to say something.
Yes, I would just like to give a brief comment on this question of consciousness, because I think that many people who are not very heavily involved in computer science have an overestimated view of what the computer can do. I think that what some people have argued is that this lack of self-consciousness is still a huge difference between the machine and the human brain. I mean, in chess, you won't notice because, of course, we have the machines doing much better than humans. But when it comes to understanding the context, the environments, I think that many people have an overestimated see it as a threat without really understanding how little the machine can do in some sense. Whereas in the areas we have been talking about, the machine can have an impact on people's choices. But when it comes to understanding, to this cognitive aspect, so I noticed that it was Arild Næss, I think, who wrote this question about bringing in philosophy of mind, which I completely, that's also one of the reasons why I think we need not only ethics from philosophy, but we also need these other more theoretical. Could I also comment, just give a brief response to one of the first questions that popped up in the chat or in the question and answer, which was on methods. What methods should we use for this cooperation between computer scientists and philosophers and others? And I would just briefly point to what the Research Council did a couple of decades ago when they wanted people from other areas than philosophy and theology to do ethics. And they had an idea that we need to build double competence. which meant that biologists and people from other areas should learn something about ethics sufficiently to understand how ethics comes into their field and applies to their field, so to speak, and vice versa. And I think we have done a lot in order to for people not coming from philosophy or theology to learn ethics. But I think that people from the humanities and social sciences need also to learn much more about, for instance, computer science. So I think it's very much a question of translation, but to understand sufficiently well how it is to reason from the inside of the other subject. So this is a quick response to one idea about methods. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to add to that because there was a question about how to implement step-by-step ethics. And I think this is a very important point to make everyone that is a part of a development process able to discuss or at least flag ethical problems. Say there might be an issue that we should be discussed interdisciplinary throughout the process, from the developer, designers to the ones who buy the system and develop it further, use it. So I think we need this double competence all along the line, all through to the Norwegian innkjøpsordningen. You know, everywhere in the system, we need both some technology competence and some ethics. And of course, we need the expert to develop the main lines, but we should also empower people to raise ethical issues from their perspectives.
But we're approaching the end, but I wanted to ask, you know, seen from say the end user's perspective of some kind of systems. There are many, we use many systems that we have, by giving up on some our say rights for privacy, one of them, we receive services back, and some of those services have become, you know, important for people and give great value to people. So how do you let's just make an example like Google Maps. Many of us are using that to, you know, find our ways. So how should we think as consumers around this, if I have any takers for that question? And we only have a couple of minutes, so not I mean, I know it's a big question, but a few comments.
Well, the first thing is to ask the question, because what we do most of the time is just to consume, right? So start discussing, using the lunch, using the perspective that we have, the competence that we have to raise these questions. That's the first point. And I want to address the question about climate as well. This is also something we have to keep asking the questions. I know that's not enough, but it's the first point. Do I want to have all these 1,000 pictures, or can I delete them? You know, can I take responsibility also in the digital world for my climate? Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Leonora. We are at the top of the hour. I think it's been a good discussion. It's been a very good interaction with you guys listening, and we've received more questions than we have been able to sort of discuss here. But let's see if we will try to come back to them somehow. So I wanted to say thank you to all the panelists, and thanks also to the audience for attending our webinar this Friday afternoon. And I wish you all a very, very nice weekend. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi all.
Yeah. Trym?